Coming up on Business Incorporated. Top gas dealer in Kenya ups price on back of Russia-Ukraine conflict. The number of e-wallets in the Egyptian financial market up over 26 million in the past 3 years. Plus, Cambridge Energy Research Associate Yearly Summit begins today. Great to have you join us in Business Incorporated. I'm Laddie Williams. Let's kick off with markets. At intraday, we see markets we follow in Africa are mostly negative today at intraday, mostly in the red. Nigeria's main index is the lone gainer right now, up 0.05%, while South Africa's performance index fell by 1.21%. Similarly, Egypt's EGX 30 tumbled over 2% at intraday, highest dump there. Meanwhile, the Nairobi Stock Exchange closed Friday's trading session in positive territory, up 0.17%. And over to the Middle East, trading were mostly negative also. We see that the Abu Dhabi index fell by 0.37%, while Dubai's main index declined by 1.05%. Still within the region, Saudi Arabia and the Qatari exchange traded in opposite directions. See, Saudi Arabia's index fell 0.23%, while the Qatari index rose almost 1%. All right, now let's look at what's happening in Europe. You see, Washington is in very active discussions with European governments about banning imports of Russian crude and natural gas. And also, we have the dreaded word being passed around right there, stagflation. Let's talk to Rob Watts right there in Berlin. Well, Rob, soaring oil and gas prices are fueling fears of a so-called stagflation in Europe. What can you tell us?
Yes, there is a great deal of concern that Europe is heading for a prolonged period of low economic growth and steep price rises, and oil and gas prices are the main driver of that. Oil prices are just continuing to soar. Brent crude briefly topped $139 per barrel as it surged almost 18% at the start of trading on Monday. That's a level not seen since 2008. Prices are actually fast approaching all-time highs as well, driven by the war in Ukraine and the uncertainty that that has brought over Russian oil and gas supplies. The latest leap is being attributed specifically to the growing likelihood of the US and European countries banning imports of Russian oil. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says talks to that end are taking place between the allies, but he did try to temper the concern by saying they wanted to make sure there was still what he called an appropriate supply of oil on world markets. The even tougher decision ahead for Europe, though, is whether or not they ban imports of Russian natural gas, which makes up 40% of the EU's supply. Natural gas is already at record high prices, and that's a key reason why the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, is meeting with Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi today to discuss Europe's energy supply.
Well, it's all about record prices today. And you see, oil giant Shell is being heavily criticized over recent oil purchase from Russia. What's the problem there?
Well, even though there is no ban on imports of Russian oil or gas as yet, petroleum companies are coming under a great deal of pressure not to buy from Russia. The UK-listed company Shell is one of the firms that is still buying Russian crude, but the company has been defending itself against criticism of its latest purchase. It says it was a difficult decision, but that it was forced to buy the oil from Russia in order to maintain timely supplies of the fuel to Europe. It said that without that, Europe's energy industry would not be able to assure the continued provision of essentials to European citizens over the coming weeks. Shell has also sought to allay some of the criticism by promising to donate profits from the Russian oil to Ukrainian causes, but nevertheless, pressure continues to be applied to oil companies to stop dealing with Moscow. Ukraine's foreign minister is among those turning up the heat. He said that Russian oil and gas, quote, smells of Ukrainian blood.
Quite interesting. All right, but how's the week shaping up on European markets right now?
Well, European markets have been suffering more than most since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and we can expect another tough week, particularly if the behaviour of Asian markets is anything to go by on Monday. Stocks in Tokyo plunged just short of 3% during trading as nations and businesses stepped up their sanctions against Russia. Stocks in mainland China also fell, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng lost 3.4%. But also struggling is the euro. It slid to its lowest value against the dollar for almost 2 years and just briefly dipped below the value of the Swiss franc for the first time since Switzerland stopped pegging its currency to the euro. Now, the European Central Bank's decision-making committee is due to meet later this week, and they have a tough job on their hands, having to steer the Eurozone through the dual crises of the war in Ukraine and the still fragile recovery from the coronavirus pandemic.
All right, thank you so much. That's Rob Watts right there in Berlin. All right, now let's look at what's happening in the UK with Juliana. See, UK fuel prices have soared to new record highs, with the average cost of a litre of diesel rising to £1.61. No end in sight for the spiraling cost. Juliana, how are consumers adjusting to these prices? Is the government planning any support?
Yeah, good afternoon, Laddie. You're right, no end in sight for these spiralling costs, and it appears as if those comments made by the US Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, over the weekend, suggesting that perhaps Russian oil and gas exports would be stopped, is really fueling these prices. As you said, a litre of diesel has now reached £1.61 per litre, and if you go back just 12 months ago, it was about £1.21. I think really in the UK it's petrol prices, although lots of people still drive diesel cars. It's the petrol prices that are really going to impact consumers. But it's the diesel that is the benchmark, well, not the benchmark, it's the backbone of the UK's business sector. HGV, lorry drivers, that's all they use. That's the fuel that they use to drive those cars, that diesel, and the increase is really staggering. There have been so many calls now being pushed towards Chancellor Rishi Sunak to try and cut VAT from 20% down to about 15%. This is expected to save consumers about 6.5 pence per litre. That doesn't sound much, but it is going to be a significant amount, especially because we know inflation is running high. We're expecting more higher prices when national insurance and the energy price cap increase in just about a month's time. We have seen similar countries do so: Spain, France, Italy. They've all cut the VAT for the price of fuel for their consumers, and now motoring groups such as the AA and RAC are desperately asking the British government to do so here too.
All right, we'll be watching the government's next move there. But Russia's isolation continues. Latest, the top London law firm, Freshfields, cutting ties with Russia's VTB bank. Tell us about this one.
Well, gosh, yes, it's the same story that we've been hearing all over the weekend. It's as we enter day 12 of the invasion, huge global firms have now completely isolated Russia from global markets. As you said, it's actually Freshfields, Brookhouse, Deringer. They are considered part of this magic circle of international law firms that are based in London. Huge turnovers, pretty eye-watering. They've decided that they are going to stop and cease communication with their main Russian client, which was VTB Bank. That's no longer going to continue. We've also had Linklaters, another Magic Circle law firm, decide that they're going to be shutting their Russian offices effective immediately, as well as Norton Rose Fulbright. Now, they're the law firms. We also heard earlier today the big two accounting firms, the big two of the big four, KPMG, PwC. Again, they've got thousands of staff in Russia, big partners on lots of money. They are ceasing their companies there, although I believe some of them may be still active in Russia. but under some sort of a vague terminology at the moment. And then, of course, the big ones over the weekend with Visa and MasterCard, Netflix, TikTok, lots of social media giants, even Inditex, which is the parent company of Zara, said they are going to be shutting their stores. So it is really, really biting these sanctions. Is it enough? It doesn't seem that it's enough, because the humanitarian corridors that have been opened have still been seeing shelling. Innocent people are still dying in Ukraine. And then, just to quote Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who's just been speaking on air on British media, this is not supposed to be an attack on the Russian people. It's supposed to be an attack on the Russian regime. But unfortunately, it is hitting Russians exactly where the target was supposed to hit.
Quite sad. It's hitting innocent Russians there. But I heard the FTSE 100 hit record lows earlier. Any respite on intraday?
No is a short answer. Still triple-digit losses being felt on the FTSE. Most blue chip shares have dropped today, particularly in banking. Banking shares are down significantly. Also travel stock, lots of airlines that were just about to recover from the pandemic, because of course all restrictions in the UK were lifted, but alas, lots of people really frightened to travel towards Eastern Europe because of this evasion, which is why British Airways owner IAG, their shares were down by about 9%. No surprises, because of oil prices reaching about $139 per barrel. I think it's simmered down to about $131 per barrel. Shell, their shares are up by about 5%. BP, their share price is also up 2.9%. But the FTSE All-Share at intraday is down by 1.90%. The FTSE 100 is down by 1.65%. And the FTSE 250, the domestic market, really down by about 3.03%. In the currencies market, the British pound is currently trading down against the US dollar by 0.59%. No surprises, it's trading up against the euro by 0.30%. And the British pound at intraday is trading down on the Japanese yen by 0.40%, Laddie.
I guess the dollar keeps raging on there. All right, thank you so much, Juliana, for the update. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right, now let's take a look at what's happening with Asia. There, see, Asia Pacific shares declined today as oil prices surge, with the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war continuing to weigh on investor sentiment globally. The Hang Seng Index in Hong Kong led losses, regionally dropping more than 4% at one point before seeing a slight recovery. The benchmark index closed 3.87% low on Monday as shares of HSBC plummeted 7.09%. Mainland China's Shanghai Composite shed 2.17% on the day to 3,372 points, while the Shenzhen component slipped 3.4% to 12,573 points. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 also saw heavy losses as it tumbled 2.94% to close at 25,221 points, with shares of robot maker Fanuc plunging 7.72%, while the Topix index shed 2.76% to 1,794 points. South Korea's Kospi fell 2.29% to finish its trading day at 2,651. Over in Australia, the S&P ASX 200 dipped 1.02%, closing at 7,038, while MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan dropped 2.7%. It's a bloodbath out there today. Same story in the U.S. Dow futures lost about 549 points, so down 1.63%, while the S&P 500 futures and the NASDAQ 100 futures slid 1.46% and 1.55%. And see, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Sunday that the U.S. and its allies are considering banning Russian oil, natural gas imports in response to the country's attack on Ukraine. Despite the move away from risk, government bond yields were little change on the session. Benchmark 10-year Treasury note was just slightly higher at 1.72%. And oil prices continue surge as the market reacts to supply disruptions stemming from Russia's ongoing invasion of Ukraine. We're seeing prices taper a bit at this point. We see West Texas Intermediate crude futures spiked nearly 9% higher to $126 per barrel. At one point, the price rose $130.50. Sunday evening, its highest since July 2008, before retreating. The international benchmark, Brent crude, soared 9.9%, high to $129.75. Brent hit a high of $139 at one point overnight, also its highest since July 2008. U.S. average for a gallon of gas topped $4 on Sunday, according to AAA. In the rapid move due to the conflict, the underlying cost of oil accounts for more than 50% of the cost of gas that consumers put in their cars. And after the break, more stories on the African continent. That's at the moment. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Still watching Business Incorporated. Well, cyber attacks on businesses and government agencies have increased following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, with the risk of spillover cyber attacks against non-primary targets becoming much more widespread. What can countries in Africa do at this time to reduce these risks? Well, we have Confidence Safely, founder, executive director, CyberSafe Foundation, joining us on the program. Great to have you.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so what are the cyber risks right now with, this rising geopolitical tensions?
Thank you so much. I mean, that's a very interesting question. And I'm saying it's an interesting question because Russia's war in Ukraine is generally raising cyber risk worldwide. So the thing is, we see this war happening physically with conventional military artillery like missiles and guns. But what we are not, we're not so conscious about is there's also the digital equivalent of that war with cyber weapons. The case in point is the Conti ransomware gang in Russia that's already said very openly that it will strike the critical national infrastructure of any country that launches cyber attacks or any other war against Russia, in response to what's happening in Ukraine. And then Ukraine, on the other hand, as well, is actively recruiting information security, experts as volunteers via the dark web to carry out both offensive and defensive attacks against Russia. So generally speaking, the internet knows no boundaries. And because of that, there are risks. There are risks such as misinformation. I mean, there's fake news on social media right now. In the least conscious way to the very conscious way, people are spreading a lot of fake news. Some of it is real news, but it just really, really needs for us to sit back and be able to judge which of these things we're seeing on the internet is true. There's also supply chain attacks. So what do I mean by that? I mean, a tool that you're using, a productivity tool that you're using in this part of the world, for example, is actually coming from another part of the world. And if that particular tool or the vendor that you're using that particular productivity tool within your organization is attacked and successfully so, what's going to happen is that the impact is going to trickle down to your organization right here in Africa. We also have social media accounts being hijacked to spread propaganda, and this is actually both ways as well. We have hacktivism happening now very actively. So, and it's on both ends. So, organizations or hacktivists, what I mean by hacktivists, like guys who are basically committing cybercrime in support of one of the parties or both of the, at different times, maybe supporting Russia or supporting Ukraine, could be carrying out different attacks to deface, websites, for example, or do different things that ensures that they are able to make their stand known that, okay, they stand with this party, maybe Russia or Ukraine. There's also malware attacks, and just to make this very simple, malware is any harmful code, that makes a computing device, act in a way that it wasn't programmed to do so. So
Right.
We're having all of this kind of risk, across board globally as well.
Right. Well, obviously, Africa isn't insulated from these risks, but what should, African businesses and, countries be doing at this time?
Oh, definitely. Africa is not insulated. And I want to bring back a bit of history as well here. In 2017, North Korea launched the WannaCry attack. And we see that although the attack was targeted at a particular country, it actually ended up spreading to 150 countries across the world. So the key thing to note is that the internet knows no boundaries. And because of the interconnectedness of the world that we live right now, the impact of any cyber attack across the world would definitely trickle down to Africa. And I would say that basically one of the key things we need to do is get the basics right. So for example, do we have software patch within our organizations? Do we have two-factor or multi-factor authentication turned on all our platforms? Or even for your small business, for example, have you strengthened your password? Have you chosen to use very strong passwords? So it's very important that we get the basics right. Now, going past the basics, it's also important that based on the size of the organization and the maturity level, that you take the right steps to protect your crown jewels. What do I mean by your crown jewels? I mean those things, those parts of your systems and infrastructure that without which your business actually rests heavily on. You need to be able to protect them and show up security for them. You also need to have a business continuity plan in place in case of a cyber attack, in case a ransomware attack hits your organization. How do you continue doing business? Because right now, we are not going to be talking about if your organization is going to be attacked, but when. So it's more important to attain cyber resilience than, generally speaking, just ensuring
Right.
that your organization is cyber
So
from attacks.
it's not about if, it's when. All right, so
It's when.
what are cybersecurity companies doing?
Okay, so it's not doomsday, really. I wanted to just put a balance there,
Right.
It's not the end of the world. I would say, generally speaking, cybersecurity companies, again, depending on the maturity level of the organizations that they're providing advisory to. For the big institutions, for example, the banks, for example, they have threat intelligence, streams that gives them an update on what's happening in different parts of the world. They can gain learnings from there, begin to show up different kinds of defenses based on how they feel the threat landscape is evolving. So depending on the size of the organization, you should be able to have different things in place that you put in. But again, I would say go back to the basics. Everyone needs to go back to the basics, get all of those basics right, and then begin to move up from there. But generally speaking, listen to the companies advising you right now as it has to do with cybersecurity, and it's better off to invest now to protect the organization than having to invest after you've been hit by an attack.
Quite interesting. Well, thank you so much, Confidence Staveley, founder, CyberSafe Foundation. It was great having you on the program.
Thank you so much.
All right, now, moving on, the Cambridge Energy Research Associates Week, a yearly meeting point for energy leaders, experts, ministers, exhibitors, among others, for discussing energy and related issues, begins today in Houston. This year's theme is Pace of Change, Energy, Climate, and Innovation, which addresses the challenges and opportunities of reducing emissions while supplying the needs of a growing economy. Well, the OPEC Secretary General and Chief Coordinator of the 23 member nations, OPEC Plus, His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Sanusi Bakindo, and other industry giants already in Houston for the Sarah Week. And the Russian-Ukraine crisis added to the introduction of value-added tax on liquefied petroleum gas sent prices to an all-time high in Kenya. Friday, Ruby's Energy Kenya reviewed its retail prices, increasing the refilling price of a 13-kilogram cylinder close to 250 shillings. According to the firm, the dealer's price for the 13-kilogram cylinder was at 2,684 shillings before VAT, which pushed it to 3,113 shillings. However, the consumers will be refilling the cylinder at 3,340 shillings starting today. And the number of e-wallets grew in the Egyptian market over the past 3 years to a record 26 million, up from 9 million in previous years, with 23 banks introducing related services. According to the Central Bank of Egypt's transactions using e-wallets increased to 268 billion Egyptian pounds in value over the same course, up from 888 billion Egyptian pounds in the previous years. Additionally, e-commerce transactions inched up from 16 billion Egyptian pounds to 30 billion. So e-transactions through e-points of sales rose during the same period, up by 170 billion Egyptian pounds from 110. However, the number of POS increased by 978% over the past 3 years to reach 740,000, up from 68. And that's it on Business Incorporated. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Ladi Williams. Bye for now.